to the Ascends at Boston Avenue podcast. My name is Philip Boone. I'm the Mid-High Director here at Boston Avenue. And today I am joined once again by Reverend Sara Pugh Montgomery, one of the Associate Pastors at Boston Avenue. Hey, Sara.
Hey, y'all. What's up?
Last time we talked about Lent and what is Lent. So we're going to continue talking about this time of year, and we're going to get into Holy Week. So a lot of people know what Easter is. They celebrate Easter. They come to the Easter service. They know a lot about Easter. What is Holy Week?
Yeah, that's a great question. I actually had this wonderful experience when I first was married to my husband, and he had been born and raised in a Baptist background, and so had never experienced Holy Week before. And so he had a wonderful time of being able to actually journey within that space. So Holy Week is our week that leads up to the celebration of Christ's resurrection with Easter, because we kind of talk about the fact that it's hard to be able to really celebrate the joy of life if you haven't gone into the valley, in the deep valley of death. And so during our Holy Week, we journey with Jesus to the cross. And so we start off with Palm Sunday and then continue with Maundy, Thursday, Good Friday. We have a Holy Saturday where we wait in the midst of death, and then Easter Sunday comes around. So it's just this time of really being able to honor the fact that, you know, even for us in the midst of life, I mean, death happens and things occur that are hard and are grief-stricken. And so Holy Week really gives us the opportunity to be able to hold all of those different emotions together and doesn't allow us to skip just straight to the celebration of Easter.
Yes, I've always loved Holy Week because of the journey that you take throughout the week and the emotions. It's like a roller coaster of emotions.
Absolutely.
Throughout the week, starting really happy on Palm Sunday, and then going through Good Friday and Maundy, Thursday, and Good Friday, and continuing until you get to Easter. Mm-hmm. And Easter has a different meaning to me when I go through the rest of the week. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. If I skipped the beginning of the week and just went straight into Easter, it would have a little bit of a different meaning.
Yeah.
To me personally. We start on Sunday and what is known as Palm Sunday. I want to know, what is Palm Sunday and what's the significance of palms during this day?
Yeah, so Palm Sunday, it's that time that we celebrate Jesus's triumphal entry into Jerusalem. And so you have these narratives in John and Matthew where palms were being able to put down on the ground, and that Jesus kind of riding in on a donkey. Now, this is the first time that we, really see in a new and different way how Jesus as Messiah was different than what the Jewish community was believing Messiah would be, because they would believe that Jesus would be coming in on a horse and, kind of looking more like a royal figure. But Jesus comes in on a donkey and is able to come into Jerusalem within that way. And the people all shout Hosanna to him, which is save us. And so they're shouting these words of Hosanna as he comes in through the gates, and then they put those palms down. Now, I actually did not know what the symbol was for the palms until you sent this question to me, so I learned something new this week. But that the palms were a symbol of victory in the Roman Empire. And so this was actually one of those great symbols that was able to be used and translated in a different way of what victory meant as well. So that was something
Excellent.
That I actually had no clue. I thought we just did it because it was in the biblical text. But, it was really neat to learn that, no, there was a reason that they did that within the biblical text.
I'm impressed that you admitted that you did not know it.
Oh, yeah, I don't know a ton of stuff.
You could have just gone with it and said, I know exactly what this means. So you can always learn something new.
That's right.
Always
that's right.
learn something new. So it starts with Palm Sunday, and then we go into what is known as Maundy Thursday or Holy Thursday. What do we celebrate on that day?
Yeah, so Maundy Thursday or Holy Thursday begins what we call our Triduum, which for all of you out there that want to play Scrabble, you should look it up because it's a great word.
Do you know how to spell it?
I think it's like Triudum. You could double check me. But it's a great word to be able to use. But the Triduum is this 3-day journey that you take with Christ as well. So it's these holy 3 days. And so Maundy Thursday is the beginning of that. And that commemorates the time when Christ was gathering together with his disciples for the last time before he would go into journeying straight onto the cross. And so we have kind of 2 commandments on that come on that day. And so Maundy means mandate or command. And so that's kind of where that word came from. I did know that before this week, but I did not know about the palms. But Maundy, so we're invited to learn 2 new commandments and disciplines that day. One of them is the practice of foot washing. And so a lot of churches will have a ritual and a practice around foot washing that day. So being able to kind of cleanse and the symbol of cleansing. And you can go back and read about Jesus's time of washing the disciples' feet and kind of how that was a true example of servanthood. And so a lot of people, especially within the Brethren Church and a lot of the Moravian tradition, they really that's a very sacred thing for them to be able to do on Maundy, Thursday. But then you also have the celebration of communion that happens on Maundy, Thursday. And so a lot of churches and congregations will be able to read that this is the first time that Jesus invited his disciples to be able to celebrate the supper together and kind of told them what that supper would mean and what it would look like. So it was again transforming a Jewish Shabbat meal into what is new for us now, which was communion and that Last Supper time.
TRIDUUM.
I missed the D.
I don't remember exactly what you said, but I did look it up.
D. Yeah.
So anyone that was scoring at home that was taking the spelling test, that is actually how you spell it. TRIDUUM.
You would need a lot of multiples within Scrabble, but I think you can make
it
it happen.
2 U's I wasn't expecting, and you got those.
I did get those. I knew that one.
This podcast is very educational.
Indeed.
I want to know what exactly, and you talked a little bit about Maundy. What does Maundy mean? Just the word Maundy.
Well, and so that's that word that does mean mandate. And so you go back to the Latin and you're able to read that word mandate. And so you have then within the text in John sort of this scripture that says, "This is a new commandment I give you, that you love one another as I have loved you, and that you also love each other." And so you have this mandate within this text, and then that really sort of brings in the examples of foot washing, so this way of being able to share and express that love, along with communion, which is a way to be able to share and express Christ's love as well.
All right, so we go from Maundy Thursday, which is Thursday, into what is known as Good Friday. I want to know, what is Good Friday, and why is it called Good Friday?
Yeah. So there's this really cool thing that happens actually at the end of a Maundy Thursday worship, which is my favorite part, is that so at the end of Maundy Thursday, you are invited as a congregation to be able to strip any of the images of Christianity, or to be able to cover up any crosses, or so everything is shrouded in black at the end of the worship. Because what happens on Good Friday is basically we experience what life would be like without the church, because our Savior has died and is dead on that day. And so that image of Good Friday is really this day of sitting in the midst of that grief. It's hard for us as modern folks because we always know that Easter's coming. But it really, I invite folks to be able to sit in the midst of that time of Good Friday and to perhaps live in the mystery of believing that Christ is dead and what that would mean within your life. Because if you reflect on that, you would potentially live in a different way as well, kind of come Easter Sunday. But the good part of that, there's this great comic out there, which Jesus had met somebody, I can't remember who, but was like, "What? You call the day I died good?" Like, why do you do that? And so there's this, great little comic strip about it. But the image of good within the Good Friday is that we are always Easter people. So we know the end of the story. We know that the narrative's going to shift and change. So even in the midst of that death, we know that Christ will come again. And so we commemorate it and want to be able to have that that somberness. Usually a Good Friday worship service is very somber. They often have the Stations of the Cross, so you kind of relive the suffering that Christ went through. There's also a way of being able to hear the 7 last words, and usually during a service like that, it's actually a 3-hour-long service, and so it's from noon to 3, and folks kind of commemorate 3 o'clock as the time that Christ would have taken his last breath. And so it's this way of really being able to hold that grief and be in the midst of that grief.
Good Friday has long been my favorite service, honestly, for the whole year. I love the Good Friday service because of what it means, and you, even when it ends, you still have hope for the future because you know what's going to occur in just a few days. But also because, as someone who'd always been in the choir and singing, it's more minor key music, which is very fun to sing and kind of not. I don't want to use the word spooky because that's a little hollow of a word, but you know what I mean. It's just a little somber, and so I've always loved the Good Friday service. When I was younger, the pastor at my church did the Stations of the Cross, and there were 7 Stations of the Cross. I think there can be up to 14 or around there, but most do kind of a smaller version of 7 stations, and he would go to each station carrying the cross, and then there'd be a reading, and then there'd be the choir would sing, and it would just go all the way around, and then at the very end he would close the tomb with the Bible. Like, it would be completely pitch black, and he would just close the tomb really loudly, just close the Bible, and it'd be him closing the tomb closing. And one of the Good Friday services, he picked up the Bible, except it was a floppy Bible. So he did it. It just did plop. And it did not have the same effect, I think, that he wanted to. So,
there's such creativity that you can have within a Good Friday worship service. When I was working at a church up in New York, we would actually carry the cross as well, but we would start in Times Square. And our church was located up at 86th and Broadway. And so we would go from so we all started off in Times Square, and this cross was like 8 foot tall, so it wasn't like a little mini cross. So it, usually about 6 of us would be carrying it at a time. But we would go, and the pastor had, a book bag, and different people would do different readings at each stop. We would, we stopped at different places, and then when we were in Central Park was when we were reading about the Garden of Gethsemane, and, and it was so cool to experience that and to really take that journey and that physical walk and to be a part of that space. And then we ended back at the church and had an hour-long reflection worship service time together. But it's such a great time to be creative because everybody knows grief, and to be able to really allow folks to experience that in a full bodily way is a great way to help everybody be able to deal and handle with that grief.
Yeah, when I was in high school, I think it was my sophomore year of high school, for the Good Friday service, the youth group, we did a play. And it was and it was completely mime. It was our youth director and I think maybe another adult. I think there were 2 narrators, and it was completely mimed. And it sounds silly, but we actually wore like clown makeup. And whenever you think of it, you're like, well, it's not a comedy. But it was probably one of the most powerful things I've ever done, because we completely mimed the whole thing, and then at the very end, the person who played Jesus had a tear under his eye for Jesus, which I think. No, they don't do that. I was gonna say I think they do that in Godspell, but they have something different for that musical. And he went kind of behind the altar, and kind of made like the sign, made his body into like a cross, and then there was a noise, and he just fell completely. And it was one of the most powerful moments, because then all of a sudden you couldn't see him. He was like, where'd he go? So it was the end of the Good Friday service, and it was extremely powerful, and more powerful than I thought it would be, because whenever we're gonna do clown makeup, that sounds silly. Or I guess since we're miming, it would be more mime makeup, I guess you could say. But yeah, so there's lots of different things you can do for a Good Friday service. And then a few years ago, it was all prayer stations. I went to a Good Friday service where it was like during these 3 hours you can come and there will be prayer stations you can go to.
There's also lots of creative things you can do for Maundy, Thursday as well. And so there's, a wonderful church that I visited in Miami, Florida, that they decided on Maundy, Thursday that they were a downtown church, and there was a lot of folks who were around that were homeless, and they would come and visit the congregation and be a part of their worship service. But they wanted to do something more and different for this community that was always there and was a part of their space. And so they kind of started to connect then the Maundy, Thursday and the mandate for foot washing and the mandate for loving with the care for folks who were homeless. And so during that day, instead of just having a Maundy, Thursday foot washing service for their congregation, they actually had it for the whole homeless community. And they would have folks that would line up outside waiting. And so they'd be able to, the folks would come in and be able to register and be able to go to a different station and be able to have their feet washed by a member of the congregation. And they also had some podiatrists on board to be able to help deal with any kind of foot problems that might be coming up. And we're able to really just kind of take that tender gentleness of being able to care for another person's foot within that, which is usually not what people are wanting to be able to touch, to be able to touch somebody's foot. And then after they received their foot washing, they would then go to another space where they would receive a new pair of socks and then a completely new pair of shoes. And so just this wonderful connection to how to really, again, to physically be able to take on what this idea of Maundy, Thursday means, of Christ truly commanding us to love one another by washing each other's feet. And so one of the women who participated in it said that, one of the gentlemen that she was washing his feet, and he asked her, he said, why are you doing this? Like, why are you kneeling down in front of me and washing my feet? And she looked up at him and she said, because Jesus told me to. And so it's just this simplicity of Maundy, Thursday and the simplicity of Good Friday, but also the creativity that you can have within both of those services is really unique.
And foot washing is just an amazing experience because
Yes.
it gives people a vulnerability that they're not used to.
Correct.
That makes you feel a little like to have your feet washed for a lot of people gets you out of your comfort zone. So and it takes you back to when you read the Bible about Jesus washing people's feet. And in those days, their feet were a lot more disgusting than ours would be today. So it's just a vulnerability and gets you out of your comfort zone that people aren't used to.
Right. And I think that discomfort is truly where we encounter God the most. And so, Maundy, Thursday is very uncomfortable for folks because of the foot washing. Good Friday is very uncomfortable because you're sitting and just talking about death and grief and pain. And those things aren't fun and easy to talk about. And so both of these services can also be very uncomfortable spaces for folks. But I think that's why, just like you, they're some of my favorites because I usually connect to God the best through those services because I'm also kind of pulled out of my own comfort zone. And when I'm out of my comfort zone, that's when I'm able to relate to God the best because I'm not relying upon myself, and I'm really relying upon God to meet me within that space.
And then we get into Easter. And a lot of people know about Easter, know what's going on during Easter. Can you give us just a few sentences or however many sentences you want about what Easter is? You can go as in depth as you want, or
Sure.
The microphone is yours.
Microphone is mine. So yes, Easter Sunday is just, it's this great celebration, and it's what we continue to celebrate all year round. And so it, kind of is the climax of this whole week. It's the climax of Lent, but it's also the climax of our Christian journey. And knowing that through the celebration of Easter that we are proclaiming that death does not win. and that life continues. And that's the biggest, to me, the biggest point of Easter is that, Jesus, there's a lot of different stories and narratives about how there were, other people born within the Middle Eastern time that Jesus was born that were also of virgin births, or were also able to perform miracles, and were also able to do different things. But the resurrection is the one thing that is purely unique to who Christ is and to what we commemorate and celebrate. And that, I love the disciples' narratives about after resurrection, because I'm with them. I mean, I would be like Thomas and be like, nah, like, there ain't no way that's really you, dude.
Well,
like,
I would totally be a doubting Philip.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I'd be the doubting Sarah. I mean, I probably would have also...
There already was a Philip, so I'd have to
Oh, that's true. So you'd have to be somebody different.
I'd have to be somebody else.
And so there's, just kind of these narratives for post-resurrection accounts is truly inspiring, because it really brings me in a lot of ways into how I do think I experience Christianity and resurrection, that sometimes it's things that's really hard to believe in. I mean, it's hard to believe that a guy who was dead is now alive, and what that means and what that looks like, and that we celebrate that each year, and that we are able to pull in then that hope throughout the whole year, that we know that death does not win. And so every time we have a funeral, I always remind folks about that. Mm-hmm. Death does not win. And so that it's going to look different for all of us. We're not going to have them physically here, but that death is not the end, and it's not the full answer.
What is our Holy Week schedule at Boston Avenue? Because
Yes.
there's all kinds of services going on. Can you kind of just walk through the week?
Absolutely. And we'd love to have you be a part of any of this or all of it, just as Philip and I have said, that it's really a great time to journey through the whole week. And so we'll start off with Palm Sunday. We'll have our 8:30 and 11 o'clock worship services in the sanctuary, those traditional services. And then we'll also have a contemporary modern service in Jubilee Gym with our 13th Street worship on Palm Sunday. And at all of those, we'll be able to lift up palms and sing together, and to be able to commemorate that time together. Then we'll also journey then on Thursday will be our next worship service. So we don't have any other services throughout the week, but we'll be inviting y'all to participate in different disciplines over social media. So we'll be encouraging you to be able to do something different on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And so look to social media for that. But then we'll come back together as a worshiping community on Thursday and have our Holy Thursday service. And that will start at 7 p.m. and that will also be in the sanctuary. On Good Friday, we actually have 2 offerings this year. And so one of them is in the Great Hall, and it'll be at noon. And so it's a service of song and scripture, and that will be here at the church. But then we were also invited to participate with a lot of other community leaders and congregations as a part of a Stations of the Cross service over at the Greenwood District. And so we'll begin at Vernon AME Chapel, and I'll be a part of that and be one of the scripture readers. That will also be at noon, and it will go till 1. So we'd start at Vernon AME, but then we will walk about half a mile. So you'll need to make sure you have on good shoes for that and that you're ready to walk around.
If you want to get your steps in on that day,
that's right.
Be there at noon.
Join me at Good Friday down there at Vernon AME. And then we have our Easter Eve service that is led by our children. It's a wonderful service on Saturday, and that's at 4 o'clock. And then we'll have our Easter egg hunt, or as I call it, the stampede, at 5 p.m. It lasts about 2 minutes. And then on Easter Sunday, we'll start our time together with sunrise at 6:30 a.m. That will be in the Rose Chapel. And we'll end that service out on the steps, being able to sing This Little Light of Mine. And then we'll have worship in the sanctuary at 9 a.m. and 11 a.m. And then worship in Jubilee Gym at 11 a.m. for Easter service with 13th Street worship. So lots of different opportunities to be able to come together and worship during our Holy Week and Easter celebrations.
Excellent. That's a busy week.
Indeed. It's a fun week. It's a marathon, but it's super fun.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I do want to announce or mention that I have not yet. I want to thank our podcast engineer, Wyatt Smith.
Woo woo!
And he's waving. You can't see him because This isn't visual. But he is definitely waving. So if you know him, you can imagine him waving at me as I mentioned his name. So basically, I've had some people say that they've listened to the podcast and they enjoy it. You should thank him for making us sound good.
Yeah.
And editing it and making it go together. So this has been the Ascends at Boston Avenue podcast. We are located at Boston Avenue United Methodist Church at 1301 South Boston Avenue in downtown Tulsa. Thank you very much.